From AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor, this is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Here's your host, Chip Lutz.
Well, hello, friends. This is Chip Lutz, Unconventional Leader. Now, for some of you, you know that I have two podcasts. I have one I do for myself, Leadership Happy Hour, and I also have the one I do for the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor called Laughbox. And once in a while, I get the opportunity to talk to somebody who kind of like spans both. And I'm like, oh, I want to talk to this person for this podcast, but I also want to talk to him for this one too. So today, I get to talk to Paul Osincup for both podcasts and, well, in one hour because he's a busy guy and I appreciate his time. So welcome, Paul, to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Chip. I'm excited to be able to multitask and do two things at once for this podcast. I'm not very good at that normally, so this is great.
Yeah, I think multitasking it's a bunch of BS. I mean, people say that, oh, I can do all these different things, but truthfully, you know, what you're focused on is what you're focused on most of the time.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Now, I've had the opportunity to look at your website, and we've spent a little bit of time talking. But for our listeners out there, if you can share a little bit about who Paul is, the man, the myth, the legend.
I guess professionally, I'm a speaker, a positive workplace strategist, and a job title inventor. I tell people I'm a positive workplace strategist, and they're like, "What, man? I have no idea what you're talking about." But I kind of grew up knowing I wanted to be a teacher for a long time, and went to college and started working for the university, and I ended up getting my master's degree in higher education leadership and administration. And I did that for a long time with some really serious jobs, working with students who had severe mental health issues, suicidal ideation, drug and alcohol issues, and doing things like investigating sexual assaults and stuff like that. So really serious work. And I kind of, as a young professional, found myself moving into leadership position after leadership position, feeling like, man, I'm like a little bit on the young side to be kind of moving into these areas. And all along the way kind of would reflect on, well, why did I get selected for this job? Or how come, why am I in this situation? And I realized at some point that I was like, I think people enjoy my sense of humor, and I started realizing that was a tool of mine as a person. And on the side, I always loved doing stand-up comedy and making people laugh anyway. So, but it was something I just kind of reflected on over a few years. So now what I do is I go work with leaders and groups about adding more humor to your life, adding more fun to work, and helping people create more positive workplaces. So it's kind of in a nutshell.
That's awesome and truly needed in today's environment. Now, my first big question for you, Paul, has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but it's something that's on my mind. What is the strangest thing you've ever eaten not on a dare?
That I've ever eaten not on a dare? Probably a guinea pig.
Shut up. All right.
So hey, you asked, man, you for people listening to this, we didn't talk about what we were going to talk about, and we don't have like any sort of agenda. We just kind of going with it. So you asked, I'm going to tell you what I ate. I ate a guinea pig.
Was it deep fried? Yeah, I was at boiled.
I was at a friend's house, and his pet got out. No, I was in Peru, and I was in Peru, and they eat guinea pigs down there. It's cuisine. It's really common. It's called cuy, C-U-I. And I was in Cusco, Peru, and I wasn't super interested in eating a guinea pig, but I thought, man, how many times in my life am I going to be in Peru? I got to try this. And they brought it out to the table, like straight up just looking like a guinea pig. Like it's just on a plate, and I was like, oh man, damn.
It's
And then they bring
it's weed beady analyzed, just staring at you.
Exactly.
Like,
I just was like, I don't like this. Yeah. Like, I love fish, but I don't even really like eating fish when they look like fish. But you know, like, just give me a fillet. But so anyway, they bring it out, and then it's got this like bowl of warm water and a washcloth next to it, because it was like just really greasy, like one of those rotisserie chickens that you get at the store, but like much greasier and messier. So yeah, good question.
So did it taste like chicken?
Yeah, like super greasy chicken. It was all right. Yeah.
Super greasy chicken. Maybe it would have been better if they'd breaded it and fried it. That could have been.
Yeah, probably. And it was the only place I tried it. So maybe at another restaurant, I would have loved it. I don't know. It was okay. It wasn't bad. I ate it.
Yeah, I saw on the Food Network, I saw something not too long ago about down in Peru in South America, where they have guinea pig farms and they harvest them, and it's quite a delicacy. And I was like, oh, but they're so cute.
I know. I actually had a pet guinea pig when I was a kid, so I did feel like a horrible person. But then again, I think cows are cute too, and I love cheeseburgers. So
everybody's got to eat. That's what I say. We have 4 horses. Yeah. I had a friend that texted me the other day that's like, hey, what do you think about them exporting horses to, for food? And I was like, I'm all for it. People got to eat.
Yeah. I mean, everywhere's different. So
everywhere's different. All right, cool. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty. When you're saying you're a positive workplace strategist, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, I was kind of trying to think about, not too long ago, what is it that my goal or my mission really is with working with companies and working with people. And more and more I found wherever I go that, for one, there's just a lot of negativity, not just at work, but in media, in social media, and I don't feel that it's super helpful to any of us. And also, depending on what statistics you're looking at, anywhere between like 69 and 85% of people are miserable with their jobs and don't like their jobs.
Oh, that is
and
so sad.
My thought is, yeah, I mean, it's like, and furthermore, like, 71% of people feel like they're just a statistic. No, just kidding. I just made that up. But that one is usually like a joke grenade. It's like, wait, is that real or no? Oh, I get it, a statistic. Okay, but anyway, so my goal really is to help people enjoy their jobs more, and that's both with humor as well as I do a lot of skill development around being able to have difficult conversations in a positive way, reframe things to where you're still holding people accountable, but not using negative phrases and words and things like that in order to do it. So a lot of conflict resolution type stuff that I think is also important to create a positive work climate. Places where people feel like welcome and included, and hey, where I go to work is at least fun more often than it's not.
Right.
So I'll tell you, there was a guy who came up to me and told me, you may have heard this before, but after I did my TED Talk, this guy came up. He's got just white silver hair, probably 75 or 80 years old, and he said, hey, I appreciate your talk, and he had tears in his eyes, and I was like, man, I was trying to make you laugh, dude. But he said, I worked in corporate America my whole life and wished we'd had a sense of humor, but it made me think I wanted to tell you a joke. And I said, okay, great. And he said, so there's this guy, he decides he's going to become a monk and join a monastery. And so he goes and they tell him, okay, but you take a vow of silence and you only get to say 2 words every 7 years. And so he says, okay. So he's there, and at his first 7-year anniversary, he gets to say 2 words. And so they give him the floor, and he just looks at the rest of the monastery and says, bad food. And everybody's like, dang, man, okay. So that was his 2 words for that time. And then 7 years go by, it's 14th anniversary. He gets the floor again. He just looks at everyone and says, cold floors. And they're like, dang, man, okay, fine. So back to silence for the next 7 years. And finally, his 21-year anniversary, he gets up and looks at the entire monastery and says, I quit. And the head of the monastery, the head monk, looks at him and says, well, that's no surprise. You've done nothing but complain ever since you got here.
Oh, that's an awesome one.
Yeah, I like that. And to me, I think about if, wherever you work, if you were to give people 2 words to describe the culture or the climate or what it feels like to go to work there, what 2 words would they use? And that pretty much kind of sums up. Would they say like stressful and busy? Mm-hmm. Or would they say, family and fun? Or, it makes a huge difference.
I know for me that I thinking back over my 30 years in the workforce, I can't think of any of the work that I actually did that I woke up in the morning, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to type this today, or oh my gosh, I got to file this today. For me, it was always the environment that made a difference. Usually, and that revolved around the leader that was in charge and the people that I worked with. That if it was a sour environment, if the work was crappy and the people were crappy, it was just like, oh man, this is the worst thing ever. But even if the work was crappy, but the people were great, it's like, I could find something decent in this. And usually the element of fun kept me going.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And there's a difference between, hey, I'd love to have another day off, but, tomorrow's Monday and, at least my coworkers are pretty cool, and we at least have a good time some of the time, and it's a generally positive place to be, rather than anyone who's ever had a difficult or a job at a kind of a toxic environment. You get the Sunday scaries, and all day Sunday you're just dreading the next day because where you work is a negative place to be.
The Sunday scaries. I've never heard that before, but I think that is right now quite possibly one of my favorite phrases ever. The Sunday scaries.
Oh man, I worked at a place before that I'd get the Sunday scaries, man, and it kind of just ruined the last day of my weekend because all I'd be thinking about is like, oh gosh, I don't want to go back.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't even stop over the weekend because, gone are the days where you can actually separate yourself from work. You get emails or texts or whatever. I remember, 25 years ago where when I was away from work, I was away from work. I didn't have to worry about anything, right. Very doubtful anybody would ever call me. But I would get the end of vacation scaries.
Yeah,
it was like,
exactly.
Oh my God,
yeah, exactly.
I got to go back. I don't want to.
So let's. Well, and that's. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. To finish your sentence.
Well, that's an issue as well. Is being able to unconnect, disconnect, digitally disconnect with work too. And I think a lot of times we seek out the positive fulfillment from technology that we are not getting with relationships, with real connection and relationships, and it's just not the same. I have a niece and who's in high school, and she I was visiting their house, and she had done something different with her hair. She had like cut it and put some color in it, and I said, "Oh, I love your hair. It looks so good." And she was kind of like, "Oh, thanks." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "Well, I kind of am dating this boy, and we went out to coffee, and he told me he liked my hair, but when I posted a picture on Instagram, he didn't like it on Instagram." And I was like, "Oh my God, what a travesty!" But I said, "Well, hold on. So he was sitting with you in person, face to face, and he told you he liked it." And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that's better, right?" And she said, "Oh my God, that's not better. It's better that he likes it on Instagram. That means he really likes it. And then everyone else knows that he likes it."
That's so
and that
funny.
Conversation kind of just reframed my whole thinking about the world we live in. And that I think like we put so much more emphasis on virtual than reality. at times, and we don't get the same feeling of fulfillment from that. And so I think it's important to be able to like seek that out in real ways.
Well, and that's what I really liked about your TED Talk when I was listening to it. We were talking about how in today's environment, you know, we need leaders that are present and are vulnerable, and that, you know, humor certainly plays a part in that. You know, so when you go out and talk to different, you know, organizations, and we can come back to, you know, the whole virtual reality, you know, in a minute, because we've in the whole scheme of things, we've come so far in the last, you know, just decade on that. You know, just kind of funny. I remember when my wife and I got married, we just, as a joke afterwards, we turned around and was like, all right, we got to post this on Facebook, otherwise it's not real. And like all of, you know, all of the older people in the room were like, what? You're doing that in the sanctuary of the church? You're going to burn in hell. But it was a joke. It was funny, you know, anyway. So certainly, like, you know, humor plays, you know, a factor of leaders being approachable. And, you know, I liked what you had in your TED Talk about that. So, you know, what are some, you know, things that leaders can do, or how humor works in that regard?
Yeah, well, you know, I won't bore everybody with all the research, but there's a lot of research that shows that leaders who use their sense of humor and try to use humor more often are paid more, promoted more, seen as more credible. Because I think a lot of the fear is I'm going to be looked at like I'm ridiculous,
or that I'm
not credible. Yeah, and so, but that isn't really bared out in research. And the first thing that I think is important, though, is that there is research that shows that people who were surveyed over a bunch of different occupations and asked to describe the characteristic traits of the best leaders that they work for, the two traits that were mentioned twice as often as any others were work ethic and sense of humor. It's literally like work hard, play hard. So the first caveat of that, I think, is that you have to be able to earn it. Like you can't just be like silly comedy guy, like, hey, I got a bunch of trolls on my desk, isn't that cool? Who doesn't do his job, right?
I'm sorry, I just got this visual in my mind of, you know, me sitting at my desk with a bunch of troll dolls and how funny that would be. To me personally, I mean, I would just think that would be hilarious. That would keep my mood up all day. But continue on.
But everybody's worked with someone who is just ridiculous to the point, you know, and they might be unreliable. They don't do a good job anyway. Well, that doesn't work. So what that research, and it's from the Bell Leadership Institute, but what that tells me is you have to be good at your job and be reliable first, but that people do want that genuine realness. And, you know, kind of in a day and age where you can create your own perfect presence online, I think people smell out BS pretty easily. So one thing I think is just being courageous enough to try it. And you know, Lucille Ball has a great quote. She said, "I'm not funny. What I am is brave." And I couldn't agree with that more, in that it is a risk. I think that it's scary to be silly, particularly when you're in a leadership position. And so I think the first thing that we can do is turn the attention to ourselves, not trying to be funny all the time and use other examples or other people, but really starting with yourself. So one, you asked how, and one idea, and I've done this and I've encouraged a lot of people, and this is just a mindfulness strategy turned toward humor. But at night, before you go to bed, just think of, like, maybe while you're brushing your teeth, just think, well, what's one thing either that happened to me today or that I did today that I could laugh about or laugh at, or that other people might think was funny? And write it down in a journal, and do this for like 2 weeks. Just write it down in a journal. And it could be something really obvious, or it could be something small, like, I probably looked really ridiculous, you know, dodging my dog as I was trying to work out in my basement, if someone were to watch this. But write it down, And at the very least, you'll have 14 different anecdotes or stories to be able to come back to, and maybe tell those stories to people you work with or friends. And it might make people laugh. It'll show that you're a human being. And it usually reduces social distance between you and people who you're a leader or manager of. But the best case scenario of what tends to happen when you are doing that each night is, I think the biggest challenge in finding humor in life is finding humor in real time rather than like later on in retrospect, because people always say, oh, just laugh at yourself. But that's hard to do. Yes. Especially like, when am I supposed to do that? Like when I lock the keys in the trunk of my rental car, and like I'm on the way to an interview, like, oh gosh, life, silly me. No, I'm freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? And so, but we can train our minds to do that more often in real time, because what will happen over the course of that couple of weeks is something will occur during the day that normally might piss you off or make you freak out, make you anxious, and you'll think, oh, well, that's what I'll be writing down tonight. And that's when you kind of know you're starting to train your brain to at least see some of the humor in the situation in real time. So that's just one, actionable thing that you could try.
Yeah, humor. I'm a firm believer humor takes practice. That we as human beings, we have a propensity to focus in on the negative, and but if we're, like you said, constantly looking for, all right, what was a little bit funny about this, and then what I really loved about what you said is sharing that with your team, sharing with the people around you. We have a member in AATH, is named Darren LaCroix. He talks about how humor humanizes your leadership, humanizes you as a person. I'm a firm believer in that it makes you just firmly a lot more likable. I mean, as a leader, there's a lot of things that we do that aren't liked, but that doesn't mean we can't be likable. And sharing that funny anecdote, that funny story, is one of those things that certainly can make you a little more likable.
Absolutely, and especially if it's something that other people already maybe know about you, or is like if you're perpetually a really clean type A person, and you did something that caused a huge mess, or you're a germaphobe and something, people will find that hilarious.
Absolutely. What I loved about when I was watching your TED Talk, I'm going to put a plug in here for people to go to your website, which we'll give at the end, and watch your TED Talk, because it's awesome. But I love the beginning story about, you going into the wrong bathroom and stuff, because what it reminded me of was before I retired from the Navy, I'd quit smoking, I'd pack on a few pounds, and we have, 2 uniform seasons in the Navy. A white season and a blue season. So it was the blue season. First day I was commanding officer. I was going out to do a uniform inspection for my people. And, granted, I'd packed on like 15 pounds. And so like when I put on my service dress blue, I was like Fat Man in a little coat. I was packed in that thing like a sausage, like a sausage casing, right? So I would go to sit in my car. As soon as I sit in my car, the ass of my pants completely rip out. And I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? And so I called my brother who lived down the road, also in the Navy. I was like, hey, you got a pair of pants I can borrow? He's like, Chip, you're 2 inches taller than me. You're not going to be able to wear my pants. I'm like, all right. So as soon as I get to work, I called my entire staff in. I was like, because, I had a couple options. I mean, I could just, since I was commanding officer, I could have not done the uniform inspection completely. I could just be like, oh, I'll give it to somebody else. I could have worn a different uniform, but I was like, I really need to be out there leading from the front. So I called my whole staff in. I was like, look, here's the deal, people. And I turned around and I showed them, I'm like, I need a new pair of pants. Can you scour this building and find me a new pair of pants? And they start like busting out laughing, because they know
that is awesome.
They knew that I had packed on a few pounds, and I would make fun of it all the time. So they scoured the entire building and they found me a pair of pants. But it was just one of those things that, connected me with them a little bit more, because it made me more human.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a hilarious story. And the fact that but that's goes back to what I was saying before about, it can be scary that you're going to look silly. And so often when we think about what we look like or how we're being perceived, but it was a risk for you to do that. It was a risk for you to do that, and it paid off because it brought people closer to you.
Well, and I've always found that the people that were able to make light of a serious situation, the people that I worked for, it just, like we said, Art, it made them more human, but it made the entire environment a little less stressful. That, if they weren't all that worried about it and they were able to laugh at it, all right, well, okay, then I can take a breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I told you that I used to work with college students who had been in some type of trouble, and I had a meeting with a young man who had been arrested, and so my job was to discuss what we could do, if anything, to keep them in school when they got themselves in trouble. And I had already had a meeting with this young man that didn't go too well. He was really upset, had some anger issues, really, didn't like me. And I was now going to have another meeting. It was going to be him, his mom, and the attorney. And so I'm kind of going over my notes.
The attorney?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We got the attorney. That was my job. And
wow.
So I'm going over my notes, and right as I'm getting up to go greet them in the lobby to bring them back to the meeting room, I spill an entire thermos of coffee right on my lap. I mean, directly on my crotch. It's just soaked. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I look at it and I'm thinking, I go in the restroom, but there's nothing I can do. And so I'm like, well, I could go awkwardly hold a binder over my crotch and walk weird and see but it was down my legs and everything. So I was like, there's no way of covering this up. So I just walked out to the front lobby to get them. And I said, hey, I hope your day's starting off better than mine. This happened just now. Uh-huh. And the young man who stormed out of my office the last time we met just looks up and shakes his head and goes, I told you to see a doctor about that. And everybody within earshot started laughing. My staff who was around was laughing. There's some other students around. The mom kind of slapped his thigh oh, don't say that. The attorney's dying. But our meeting went way better this time. And I think his funny comment really broke the ice. And I think he felt okay saying that because I was basically coming out with an olive branch of, hey, I'm an idiot. Look what I did. So you're right. I do think in my experience, it really helps bridge a gap.
Yeah. It broke the tension, where, and it just connected you on a different plane than I think that most things can do. When you're thinking about humor as a tool, as a leader, certainly have you found times that it just, maybe it was I don't want to say not the right time, but it was a little more difficult or not appropriate to use it?
Well, that's difficult because, first of all, I don't think that there's a job that exists that humor isn't appropriate in that job. I've worked with police officers in inner cities. The job I had was really difficult. Barack Obama, when he was president of the United States, used humor a lot, both online and in press conferences. So there's not, occupation-wise, I don't think a job that's so serious that we can't use humor. I do think there are moments. I think, we were talking a little bit about, kind of self-deprecating humor, and I think there are times where you might not want to use that. Let's say a job interview, right? And go, well, I'm pretty good, but I'm not too organized, if you know what I mean. You might not want to, or I'm a little bit of a slob. You probably don't want to do that in a job interview. And I think, of course, there are moments, just like anything else, you're given performance reviews and people are, sad or upset. My go-to is usually comfort, understanding, silence, empathy, rather than trying to be funny or make a joke. But that being said, it doesn't mean that humor can't find its way into those situations, because I won't go into the details because it's a little bit not suitable for for the podcast, but I was working with a young woman who had been sexually assaulted. Mm-hmm. And in our conversation, she had to, explain everything that was going on and that had happened. But in that conversation, she actually kind of made herself laugh, and by the way she described something, mm-hmm. and it kind of made her smile and chuckle a little bit, to the point then, and I kind of smiled with her then, and then she started laughing so much she was crying, and she said, "I'm sorry, I just haven't said it that way before. It was just really funny," and tears that had been sitting in her eyes that now were coming out as she's laughing, and she said, "This is just the first time I've laughed since this happened." Wow. And it was such a powerful moment to see this young woman who clearly, that laughter, there was something about that, I think, that was reassuring to her that, like, I'm still here. The presence of who I really am is still here, even though I've gone through this horrible thing. So I don't know that there is really anything that humor can't find its way into, but mm-hmm. I think it's more about, are there moments that are inappropriate for leaders or anyone else to not try to be funny? Right. Yeah. It would have been inappropriate for me in that moment to try to be putting on a clown show and trying to be making jokes. Absolutely.
Pulling out your trolls, from the inside your desk.
Exactly.
Well, I think, what I love about what you just said was that, for me, I've got a weird sense of humor, and there are a lot of things that I think that are really, really funny that maybe not might be funny to my team. And so what I like about what you said is that you kind of took your lead from her, and sometimes that's sometimes what we need to do, because, I had to learn that the hard way, that I would, off the cuff, I would say something that in my head was immaterial, freaking hilarious, but the situation wasn't right. Wasn't received like I said it, and that it just fell flat. So what I like what you had on there, and I think this pairs what you were saying about having some of those difficult conversations, is sometimes taking your lead from the person you're with, which requires you need to be present with the person and really paying attention and listen to what's going on.
Well said. I couldn't say anything better. I completely agree with that. And I think that the even out of the worst types of situations, humor can be found. I was just I do a little bit of work, some professional work with The Onion, and I was talking with a staff member there at The Onion, and they were saying that they get a lot of, when they tell people that they work at The Onion, there are so many people that say, "Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for the Onion that you put out after 9/11." Mm-hmm. And they were sure that after 9/11 that was going to be the final Onion article probably ever written, but mm-hmm. they felt like, hey, we got to see if we can find any humor. And so some of the headlines that were completely appropriate and pretty funny after 9/11 was like, U.S. vows to defeat whoever it is we're at war with. Right? Because at the time we're going, what's Al-Qaeda? This is a crazy war. Or not knowing what else to do, woman bakes American flag cake. Just tying into the truth of humor, mm-hmm. that we're all sitting there going, I don't even know what to do now. I feel so helpless. Well, this woman bakes an American flag cake. So there's still ways that things can be funny, usually in truth, even out of really bad circumstances, out of pain and hurt.
Right. And it just sometimes just eases the pain. Yeah, absolutely. Now, looking at being a positive workplace strategist, what are some, besides humor, what are some other tools that you give people to, create that kind of atmosphere where people want to be? Because what I liked about, again, I'm going to refer back to your TED Talk on, how, most millennials stay their job for like a year. I think that was what you'd mm-hmm. said. So because, the culture, the atmosphere isn't a good fit for them. So if you're trying to create this, this atmosphere, this culture where people want to be, that's that's your gig, man. So what do you do?
Yeah. Well, couple things. One is, closely tied to humor is the concept of just a fun workplace environment. And most millennials, and I think most people in general, say that they would like to work in a fun atmosphere. And if you look at what is it? Not Forbes, the Fortune magazine, top 100 places to work. Their largest difference, they do like a survey of over 1 million people throughout the workforce in different occupations. Mm-hmm. And they rate companies on great place to work, good place to work. And the greatest difference of all the questions they ask questions about pay and benefits and, commitment to diversity and all sorts of stuff. But one of them is, do you work in a fun environment? And the largest difference between the good rated places and great rated places was the fun question. And so to me, this ties right in with humor. And there's a lot of people who are like thinking, yeah, the humor thing's cool, but I just don't think I'm that funny, really. Mm-hmm. And if, at home, if you're sitting there, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, I just don't know if I'm really that funny, you might be right. You might not be that funny, and that's okay. You're self-aware, which is way more important than being funny. Right. But it doesn't mean you don't have a sense of humor. It doesn't mean you don't know how to have fun. And we're way more likely to laugh when we're with other people. So workplaces that get people together doing fun things, and not just like once a year annual events. Companies spend a fortune on like holiday parties and things like that. And they do this one-off thing. And that's such a good feeling. But I'm talking about having that feeling generated every day, every week, every month with rituals that create a fun atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So that's one part is creating fun. And then the other thing is using positive conflict resolution tools. So I teach leaders with some fun interactive activities, things like using affective statements when giving feedback to other employees, and some restorative leadership and working with people who maybe got themselves into some disciplinary issues, and how you can use different language in order to get the most out of employees without having them leave that meeting feeling discouraged or not respected and that kind of thing. All of those things I think tie in.
Oh yeah. And I like that. But sometimes fun is so subjective. What's fun to one person isn't going to be fun to another person. And I like what you said about, making it kind of a ritual and, soliciting from the group as far as things that they would want to do. Because, one thing we do a lot of times as leaders, we assume people like what we like. And so there are a lot of things that I think are fun. However, they might not be fun to anybody else. So,
absolutely. Like I love ping pong, and I'll play anybody at ping pong, and I could do that all day long. But I found that there's not that many people that like to play ping pong. And so, you're absolutely right. But some people, it doesn't mean though that a workplace couldn't say, okay, we're going to have a ping pong tournament, and we need someone in charge of food and bringing food. Well, a lot of people like food. It's like, hey, I hate ping pong, but I'll eat some food and watch you fools play ping pong. And then we need someone to create the build up for the tournament, the hype, and send out emails or take some pictures of people in their ping pong headbands and whatever. Maybe there's somebody that wants to do that. So, somebody who can come up with prizes. Does someone want to MC it? Now, all of a sudden, it's becoming an event. And then you've just got people who might just want to come watch and spectate and check it out. So I think that both humor and fun need to be inclusive.
Absolutely. But I like what you said about food. Everybody likes food. I find that, things centered around food usually go pretty good, so
Usually that's going to at least get a few people out.
Yeah.
Even that weird guy with trolls on his desk.
And that
He'll
weird
make
guy.
his way out.
Well, one of my, both my command tours, when I was in the Navy, like Thursday was always the entire staff would go out to lunch. But the rule is that we don't talk about work. We do not talk about work at all.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the whole thing was just to get to know, people as people. And that's, we got, because how it is when you have like a potluck at work, people, they grab their plate, they go back to their cubicle, and then they scour,
Yep.
they eat their food and they don't talk to anybody. I mean, that defeats the whole purpose. I mean, the whole thing, I think, what I hear you saying with fun is that it creates a different social atmosphere, for the people that are around them, which would probably elicit a little more humor, a little more, because every department, every organization has its own sense of humor. So it's one of those things where you're going to find things funny at work that only you're going to find funny at work, and you might go home and try to tell your spouse about it, and you're like, "Oh man, this happened today. It was so hilarious," and she looks at you like, "That's not funny." I'm like, "No, it was there. It was awesome. It was hilarious."
Well, and what I think building on that is really important, and this is what I try to help with, is whatever it is that companies are trying to plan to do, we have to be way more intentional than we ever have before in, okay, well, how are people going to interact with each other at this event? Because we can't just assume that human beings know how or are willing to interact with other human beings anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so there needs to be some intentional mixing of people and activity to get them to do that. And it's you could say, "Oh, that's sad, that's too bad," but I think it's just the world we live in. We don't have to have that interaction anymore because we have our sweet little precious phones.
Right.
But I was at an event for a company, and they were merging two different sites. And so they had this event at a winery where these two different sites, the people who worked there could meet each other. But there was nothing done at the thing. It was just you show up and there's some food and wine. And so it was employees of one site sitting there talking to people they already know. And even in that one group, there's cliques and you're just hanging out with the people you already know or like.
Right.
And then there's the people from the other site doing the same thing. And what needs to happen are activities that have been thought through where people can have fun, and we're really getting people to ask questions of each other, get to know each other. And, all of those things have always been good and important and helpful in getting teams, to gel and that kind of stuff. But I think never more so than now when, I think we can't assume people really have the skills or are willing to use the skills to just go up and introduce and ask questions of one another.
It's always easier to hide in your phone. Why interact
Absolutely.
Why interact with the real world when I can just hide in my phone?
Yeah. And part of that is safety too. It's like, I feel kind of awkward just going and introducing myself, but I don't want to look awkward standing here by myself staring off in the distance. But if I'm on my phone, it looks like I'm at least occupied doing something.
Right. I guess the way you could intertwine the two is just, the first person to find the funniest meme on Facebook and share it with somebody around them.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. I think I'll use that the next time I speak.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I'm going to write that down.
Oh man, you've combined
or see if you can find somebody in this room on Facebook.
Yeah, that would be even better, and see the most awkward picture of them in their profile picture.
Yeah, exactly.
But that might be hurtful humor. Anyway, you have combined the two things I love talking about the most today. I love talking about using humor as a tool, and I love talking about leadership. It has been so much fun, talking to a kindred spirit today. If after today people want to find you and they want to watch your awesome TEDx talk, where do they go?
You just go to my website. It's just my name, Paul Osincup. That's OSINCUP.com. And I've got that and some other talks right there on the website. So you can just check it out.
Yeah, good. And I would encourage anybody to go there. I mean, great content on his website. A really nice, well put together website, one. But two, the videos on there are fantastic, and you get even more content than you got in the podcast today. Now, look, I always like to end one of my podcasts with a few strange questions from my Overstuffed Would You Rather book. And so I'm going to ask you ahead of time if you're game. They're all random. I'm just going to open up the book to see where they land.
Let's do it.
All right. First question, Paul. Would you rather have to watch with your family and friends a video of every time you've ever cursed or every time you've ever lied?
A video of every time I've ever cursed or every time I've ever lied?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, every time I've ever cursed.
Yeah, that's much better.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, my family's probably heard it anyway, so yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely every time I've ever cursed.
Definitely in my family as well. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next question. Paul, would you rather have a little man that lives in your mouth and insistently hammers on your teeth with a pick, or coexist with a small bird that lives on your nose and yanks out your nose hairs at its discretion?
I think that maybe I'm just weird, but I think the little bird thing would be nice. Just, like that. I don't have to pluck anything, and fine. Take care of some blemishes while you're at it. If I've got any blackheads or anything, just it's like I would name that bird. I would name that bird Biore. Nice.
My wife would agree with you on that. She's like, can you trim that? So I'm like, I don't see anything. What are you talking about? What are you talking? There's nothing there. She's like, All right, last question, my friend. Last question. This is the moneymaker.
All right.
Would you rather drink liquid found leaking from a garbage bag, or chew on a hairy substance found between the cushions of your couch?
Chew on a hairy substance in the cushions of my couch, or oh man,
or drink liquid found from leaking from a garbage bag.
If I'm being totally honest, when I was at a concert when I was a young man, I found a half-empty Gatorade bottle, and I was so thirsty I just drank what was in it because I was like, it's probably fine. Someone probably just left it, and it was. I think it was just Gatorade, but my friends were just absolutely disturbed that I did that. But probably the couch thing, because I know that hairy substance is just my dog's fur. So I get probably pound of his fur in every other meal anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. We have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and when I wear my ball cap to the gym, my wife's always like, "There's hair all over that." I'm like, "We live in a house with animals. There's hair on everything."
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I mean, this is just the way it is.
Exactly.
Well, hey, my friend,
same here.
I really appreciate you spending time with me today and sharing your huge, enormous brain. Great stuff. Great content.
Well, this was a lot of fun, man. I'm excited. Are you going to be in San Diego?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll see you there.
All right.
This is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Laughbox is made possible by a grant from the National Speakers Foundation and is brought to you by AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Find out more at aath.org. Be sure to review Laughbox on iTunes. For show notes and more information about today's conversation, visit laughbox.aath.org.